Did the Denver Broncos' loss to the Baltimore Ravens kill their chances at making the playoffs this year? Welcome to Broncos Syndicate After Dark. The Broncos were hit with a harsh reality check today as they were kicked in the teeth by the Baltimore Ravens in a 41-10 loss. The Broncos were outclassed on both sides of the ball, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which has been the calling card for the Broncos all season long. Their defense was exposed in this game. I thought that they went into this game with a questionable game plan. They dropped back and played a lot of spot drop zone coverage, and the problem with that is it allows Lamar Jackson to just pick you apart through the air, and that's exactly what happened today. The Broncos were so worried about him beating you with his feet that the Broncos just didn't even account for what he could do through the air. I thought that the Broncos should have died by the sword that they have lived by for the last several weeks. Play single high, play man coverage, and I've seen the argument that that's not something you should do against Lamar Jackson. And to an extent, I agree with that. But again, this Broncos team has made their hay playing man coverage and blitzing aggressively, and you just went back to something that's really not in your defensive identity. It was what you tried to do last year, and the Broncos had some of their most embarrassing losses last year when they dropped back and played that soft, squishy zone coverage. I was not impressed with that at all. Offensively, you had some bad execution on fourth down. You obviously had that early turnover with little Jordan Humphrey dropping the ball, and it popped into the hands of the Ravens defense for an interception. That was not good. You had the fourth down play where Sean Payton calls a toss. That was just a bad play call. Then you had Bo Nix miss a touchdown to Troy Franklin on a slot fade. That was open. Bo just missed it. And the play before that, Bo missed another guy as well. So at the end of the day, the Broncos definitely did not have a good day against Baltimore, but it doesn't mean they are out of it. And like I've talked about before, I think that this could actually be a good win or a good loss for the Denver Broncos because they're going to go into Kansas City next week pissed off and ready to avenge this loss. But let's go ahead and bring in the standings for the AFC from this week. And the only game left for the week is going to be the Chiefs versus the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. And regardless of what happens in that game, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to remain the number one seed in the AFC. So the standings for the AFC are locked in for week 9. KC, number one seed. Buffalo, after picking up a big win this week over the Miami Dolphins, they are the number 2 seed at 6-2. The Steelers remain the 3 seed after their bye week this week at 6-2. Buffalo's 7-2. The Steelers are 6-2. You've got the Houston Texans at 6-3. They are going to fall a little bit after they lost to the New York Jets this week, but they're still in prime contention to win the AFC South. The Baltimore Ravens replaced the Denver Broncos as the number 5 seed at 6-3. The Chargers, number 6 seed at 5-3 after their big win today over the Cleveland Browns. And the Denver Broncos, not out of it, guys. They are still in it. If the season were to end today, the Denver Broncos would still be in the playoffs with the number 7 seed. They would travel to Buffalo to face off against the Bills, which ironically enough was the same matchup that they would have had entering this week. So honestly, not much has changed for the Denver Broncos. You could still face off against the same opponent in the playoffs if the season were to end today. And the Broncos have a very favorable schedule coming up here with Indianapolis, Cincinnati on that schedule, Cleveland on that schedule, the Raiders on that schedule, the Chargers on that schedule. You've got the Chiefs, who you're going to play twice, and that Week 18 game, the Chiefs might already have their playoff seeding locked up, and they might choose to rest starters in that game. That would spell good news for the Broncos. I think that in the game against Kansas City, we're going to see the Broncos defense go back to their old ways, go back to playing a lot more single high man coverage and trusting your defenders to win one-on-one matchups. You're not worried about Patrick Mahomes scrambling like you are Lamar Jackson scrambling, so you're not going to be as worried about keeping eyes on the quarterback against Patrick Mahomes. I think the Broncos have a formula that they know works against Patrick Mahomes. It worked last year in that Week 18 game against the Week 8 game against the Kansas City Chiefs, where ultimately Denver was able to dominate pretty much everything the Chiefs were trying to do offensively. The Broncos had a good plan on defense where they basically doubled Travis Kelce and then played man-on-man across the board for the rest of the team. So I think that that's going to be a very similar game plan that the Broncos are going to go into this week having. I think that the Broncos are going to go into Kansas City pissed off after they played a really terrible game in Baltimore, and I think that the Kansas City Chiefs should be prepared for a dogfight because the Broncos, they want to be taken seriously. They know what this loss is going to do in terms of public perception of their team. In terms of how I view this team, not much has changed, quite frankly. I do feel like the defense definitely is on notice a little bit, but I'm hoping that they're not going to go back to their ways of 2023 with soft zone coverage for the rest of this season. I think this was just more of an opponent-related adjustment that kind of came back to bite the Broncos in the rear end. So ultimately, the Broncos, they just got to go into Kansas City and they've got to showcase that they can keep up with the big boys in the NFL. If they can do that, then I think they're going to garner a lot more respect in the NFL in terms of some of their rankings from the national media, because right now, you know that in terms of like the betting lines as well as power rankings, the Denver Broncos are going to fall, and they're probably going to fall hard after this game. You know that hot take artists on ESPN and Fox Sports and all of those shows on TV, they're going to be trying to paint this as the Denver Broncos falling on their face and this being the death sentence for the Denver Broncos for their season. It is now on the team to go out there and prove that this loss is going to be the low point for their season. They're going to bounce back. They're going to shake it off. It's on them to prove that they can compete with the big boys in the NFL. And it's all going to start next week against Kansas City. And then after that, you've got a home game against Atlanta. That game against Atlanta does favor you because it's probably going to be a little bit cooler in terms of weather. The game's outdoors. The Falcons are a dome team that plays in the South where it doesn't really get that cold. So on paper, that should be advantage Denver Broncos. But this Falcons offense has been playing really well. I'm going to have to go and look and see how they played against Dallas. I haven't gotten a chance to go back and look at a lot of the other games from this week. But overall, man, the Denver Broncos, they are not out of it. They are very much still in playoff contention if the season were to end today. And the Broncos are just going to have to focus on beating their opponents that they should beat throughout the remainder of the year. Even if they lose to Kansas City and Atlanta, I think they're still in pretty good shape because of the overall weakness in the AFC. All right, Broncos Country, be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos Country just like you and me. And before we dip out of here, guys, I want to tell you about the affiliate partner for today's video, Green Gridiron Helmets. Use code DENSYN, DENSYN, link in the description below, to save off your first purchase on NFL team helmets just like this one. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.